Today is the 23rd of September, and not this weekend but the following weekend we're going to be having our annual Kanon Day ceremony. So today we're going to take up a koan, number 89 in the Hekigan Roku Blue Cliff record, which is about Kanon, the Boddhisattva of great compassion. The name of the koan is the hands and eyes of the Boddhisattva of great compassion. And here's the case. Ungan asked Dogo, "What use does the great Bodhisattva of compassion make of all those hands and eyes?" Dogo said, "It is like someone reaching back, groping for a pillow with outstretched hand in the middle of the night." Ungan said, "I understand." Dogo said, "How do you understand it?" Ungan said, "The whole body is hands and eyes." Dogo said, "You have had your say, but you have only said 80% of it." Ungan said, "How would you put it?" Dogo said, "The outside is hands, the inside is eyes." Before we get into the koan, we'll just look at the characters in this story. Ungan, his Chinese name is Yunyan Tongsheng, and his dates are 780 to 841. So he was right at the very heart of the golden age of Zen in the Tang dynasty. The 10th in the 10th generation after Bodhidharma. He was a disciple of Yao Shan Wei Yan, Yakusan Igen in Japanese, and he also trained prior to that for 20 years under the great Baizhang Huai Hai, who we were looking at his teachings during the last sesshin, the June sesshin. Japanese name is Hyakujo. He started training under Hyakujo at the age of 12, so he became a monk very early in his life. But he did not come to awakening under Hyakujo. One writer describes him as being slow in maturing. So after Hyakujo died, he traveled around to other teachers and finally settled down with Yakusan, Yaoshan in Chinese, and ripened with him. The other character in the koan here, Dogo, was his fellow student, also a disciple of Yakusan, and also his close friend. They were actually friends for 40 years. And there are many stories of exchanges between these two friends that have been kept and are still admired today. His name, Ungan's name, was where the name of the mountain where he finally settled down to teach after he'd completed his training, means Cloud Cliff Mountain. Among Ungan's Dharma heirs was Dongshan Liangje, and of course Dongshan was the founder of the Caodong school in China, Soto. His Japanese name was Tozan Yokai. So both Tozan and also Ungan appear in our ancestral line. So direct ancestors for us. I think we don't have time tonight to go into a lot of anecdotes for these two, but just a little bit about his demise. It's and this is from the records that were made soon after. It says that Yunyan became ill during the year of 841, and after giving orders to have the bath ready, he called the head of the monks and instructed him to prepare a banquet for the next day because a monk was leaving. On the evening of the 27th of the month he died. So the monk who was leaving was him. There were many relics in his cremated remains which were placed in a stupa, and he received the posthumous title, Great Teacher, No Abode. The other character here is Dogo. And Dogo was a little bit older than Ungan, about 11 years, and was his senior also in the Dharma. He had guided him to come and become a disciple of Yaksan. Dogo was the teacher of Zengon and Sikiso, two well-known masters, probably most famous for the koan I Won't Say, in which Zengen questions him about a corpse. They've gone to offer condolences to a family, and the corpse is laid out there in a coffin, and Zengen knocks on the coffin and says, alive or dead? And Dogo says, I won't say, I won't say. Zengen then says that to Dogo that if you don't tell me, I'll hit you. And Dogo says, strike me if you must, but I won't say. And then Zengen does, in fact, hit his teacher. Later on, Dogo dies, and Zengen goes to see Sekiso, his brother in the Dharma, and asks him the same question, alive or dead? And Sekiso says, I won't say, I won't say. And at this point, Zengen comes to awakening. Dawu died in 835, and it says that he became ill, his condition became very grave, and the monks started to visit him to inquire after his health. And he said to them, do you understand the phrase, having received, making restitution? The monks were startled by these words. 10 days later, just before his death, Dawu said to the congregation, I'll go to the west. I shouldn't go to the east. And upon saying these words, Dawu died. There's one, we could say there's a third character in this koan, which is, of course, Kanon, the great Boddhisattva of compassion. Avalokiteshvara in Sanskrit, hearer of the cries of the world. In Japanese, he or she, and she can be both, she's called Kanon, Kanzeon, Kanjizai. And sometimes is actually referred to as being the mother and father of the Buddhas. Just as Manjushri is sometimes referred to, the Bodhisattva Manjushri is referred to as the teacher of the Buddhas. So these two, Manjushri and Avalokiteshvara, represent the two wings of the bird of enlightenment, compassion and wisdom. That's why they're referred to as the teacher and the mother and father of the Buddhas. They're what Buddhahood comes out of, you could say. So they're very exalted beings, not inferior to the Buddhas themselves. Now in the koan we have this question, what does the great Bodhisattva of compassion make of all those hands and eyes? Sometimes Kannon is depicted with many, many arms, and in each of the hands on those arms there is an eye shown. She or he can have 12 faces, 33 different kinds of bodies, different manifestations, and it said 84,000 different forms. There's an amazing place in Kyoto called Sanju Sangendo, which has an extraordinary Bodhisattva, Kannon Bodhisattva with 1,000 arms. The point here of this iconography is that compassion needs to take countless forms in order to respond to different kinds of people and different kinds of suffering. Tolstoy once said something which can relate to this. He said, happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Every person is unhappy in his or her own way. The essence of compassion is an appropriate response. A response that fits. So, to look more into our case. Ungan asks Dogo, what use does the great Bodhisattva of compassion make of all those hands and eyes? So the first point of the koan is, what is he really asking? Is he talking about Buddhist iconography? This or that sculpture or painting of Avalokiteshvara? There wouldn't be much to this if he was. These hands and eyes, all those hands and eyes, as he says, is pointing to the unlimited nature of compassion. It's many forms. So we could say that what he's asking here is what is the nature of compassion? And more importantly, most importantly, how do we manifest it? How do we make it real? So this koan is really an invitation for us to consider our own hands and eyes. What are they for? How do they work? What do they give rise to? We can read the eyes as being perhaps how we perceive things, what we perceive, and the hands being what we do. These, as I mentioned, these depictions of Kannon with many arms, there's actually sculpted into the palms of the hands an eye. And she's also often holding all these different kinds of implements, a different implement in each hand. And so that each tool that she holds is embodying a different kind of consciousness. Or you could even turn it around the other way and say that every kind of action, all the different ways in which we can respond, give rise to certain kinds of understanding. So we can ask ourselves, what kind of hands and eyes do I have? What kinds of affinities do I have? Where have I got something to offer? Giving examples of this, people who've gone through addiction and gone past it often can be very helpful for those who are suffering in addictions, or somebody who's gone through a very major life-threatening illness can help those who are doing the same, or parents of children with one or other kind of difficulty. It's not always something that relates back to exactly the same experience, but can be something in one's early life which gives one a passion for a particular area. Desire for justice, or an affinity with working with prisoners or children. So Dogo then answers Ungan's question very directly. This question about what is the nature of compassion? How do I use it? How do I manifest it? He says, it's like someone reaching back, groping for a pillow with outstretched hand in the middle of the night. Well, the first thing that one might notice with this is that it's kind of paradoxical. We're talking about eyes, and yet here Dogo's saying it's something that happens in the middle of the night, so in complete darkness. This person may not even open his eyes, and yet he finds that pillow and adjusts it, gets it back under his head. So what does this mean, this middle of the night that is being talked about here? There's a clue to this in the introduction to this koan that appears in the Hekigan Roku. Engo's pointer, which kind of highlights the theme of the koan. You don't actually work on this when you take up these koans in Dokusan, but they often can be illuminating. Engo says, when the entire body is the eye, while seeing you do not see. When the entire body is the ear, while hearing you do not hear. When the entire body is the mouth, while speaking you do not speak. When the entire body is the mind, while thinking you do not think. So what Dogo is pointing to is a kind of action in which there's no thought of being a helper. No seeing the person as being a helpless victim. There's discernment there because he can find the pillow and put it where it needs to be, but not the kind of discriminating that we conventionally do. It's pointing to a kind of helping that embraces everybody without attachment, without aversion. So it's pointing to something lofty. Elsewhere in the same koan, Ingo says, you must cut off emotional defilements and conceptual thinking. Become clean and naked, free and unbound. Only then will you be able to see this saying about great compassion. You must cut off emotional defilements and conceptual thinking. Become clean and naked, free and unbound. Then your heart will be wide open. But at the same time as pointing to a lofty state, he's also pointing to something very ordinary. And this image he gives is a very ordinary one, like reaching for a pillow at night, or taking a tissue when you need to blow your nose, putting a raincoat on when it's wet. I hear of nurse aides in hospitals and rest homes get very, very low pay, but they do Boddhisattva work, or at least done with the right attitude. It has the potential to be Bodhisattva work. Changing a bedpan, wiping somebody's bottom, and doing these kinds of things. How do we see what we're doing? How do we regard urine and feces? Someone who's wet their bed. Master Dogen says, commenting on this, he says, this koan, he says, there is no distinction between eyes and darkness. There's a kind of seeing which involves not seeing. What isn't seen are false distinctions. There's a teaching in the Mahayana tradition about the 6 parameters. These are the essential ingredients in awakening for the Bodhisattva, ways of waking up. They're giving, ethical behavior, patience, diligence or vigor, meditation, wisdom. And the way in which these are perfected is to be able to carry them out without any sense of there being a self or another. In other words, you carry it out without thinking of yourself. Taking the first one, parameter of giving, dana. You perfect this by not thinking about yourself as being a giver, not seeing the receiver of the gift as being a receiver, and not seeing the gift as being a gift, because you understand that they're all empty. So there's no self-consciousness or other consciousness there. Just the act. Just giving. Just as there can be just helping. It's like someone reaching back, groping for a pillow with outstretched hand in the middle of the night. Just doing what needs to happen. Ongan then replies to this explanation by saying, I understand. And Dogo comes back, how do you understand it? He challenges him to show how he understands. Because it's all very well having an explanation like this, an image, even a beautiful one, apt one. We have to, and especially in the case of compassion, make it real. Dogen says that this I understand from Dogo is not just words, but as he puts it, the movement of his own hands and eyes. And Ungan comes back with his demonstration of understanding. And that's one of the points in this koan, is then to present it in another way, without using words. He says, the whole body is hands and eyes. Complete involvement. No room for self-consciousness. So we can ask ourselves, what would this look like in our lives? How would this look at work? In our marriage? Or when we are with our elderly parent? Or a child having a tantrum? Ungan then says, Ungan said the whole body is hands and eyes. Then Dogo said, you have had your say, but you have only said 80% of it. Why does he say 80%? It seems like a pretty good response. Master Dogen says, commenting on this, that Ungan didn't leave anything unsaid. And that Dogo's saying that he got 80% of it was a kind of praise. And there are two ways of understanding this. One is that words can never express 100% of anything. How could words get themselves around limitless compassion? Even if you just took all the compassion acts of a single day. But there's another meaning here that is probably even more important. Really, as Bodhisattvas, we can't ever think of anything as being ever completely finished. Yes, Tani Roshi would say about this story that it was this 80% was pointing to the fact that we can always do better. I was looking at the Vilamakirti Sutra recently, and there's a striking statement in it. It said, causes and conditions are the place of practice, for none of the links in the chain of causation, from ignorance to old age and death, ever come to an end. It's referring to the 12 links of dependent co-arising that show how suffering comes into existence. He's saying, and the sutra is saying, these links never come to an end. There's always going to be suffering, which means there's always suffering to respond to. Dogen also once said, when the Dharma fills your body and mind, you understand that something is missing. Since there's no end to life, that means really that there's no end to practice. To think in terms of completion is just doesn't really fit here. The Bodhisattva of great compassion really just responds. Not evaluating, not counting, not thinking of percentages, but just responding. So Dogo seems to be saying, you haven't got it on what Ungan said, the whole body is hands and eyes. So Ungan as a good Zen student, says, how would you put it? He's willing to hear what Dogo might have to say. And Dogo says, the outside is hands, the inside is eyes. One of the points of the koan is to understand whether this is somehow a deeper way of expressing it from the other one. Is this one more than 80%? The other commentator in the Blue Cliff record, Master Secho, Shuido in Chinese, in his verse to this koan, he says, don't you see? The net of jewels reflect each other. Where does the eye of the staff come from? I cry, tut tut. This needs a little bit of unpacking. First of all, the net of jewels. This refers to the diamond net of Indra. This is an image that comes from Huayan literature, the Avatamsaka Sutra school, and it is a kind of model of the universe. Imagine a great net, and that at every intersection of the strands of this net there is a jewel, and that jewel reflects every other jewel in the net. So if you look into one jewel, you see the jewel next to it, and in that you see the reflection of the one next to it, and so forth. So every single jewel contains an image in it of every other jewel in the net. You could say it's an image of the holographic universe that was imagined long before anybody knew about holograms. How does this relate to compassion? Well, it's pointing to our profound interconnectedness. That we are each of us the whole universe, inseparable from each other. He then asks, where does the eye of the staff come from? There's a story behind this image that would have been known to the Chinese. It was a story about a blind mountain man who would come down to the village market to sell fortunes. He'd come down each week, and the road that went down to the village from his mountain hut was very muddy, and yet he would wear white shoes, cloth shoes, down this muddy track. And someone asked him, how come your shoes don't get dirty, old man, when you're blind? And the old man raised his staff and said, there's an eye on the staff. In other Zen literature, a staff is often used as a symbol for our true nature, what guides us. This same koan also appears in the Shoyoroku, Book of Equanimity, and there one song comments on this eye of the staff by saying, when reaching for a pillow at night, there's an eye in the hand. When eating, there's an eye on the tongue. When recognizing people on hearing them speak, there's an eye in the ears. Su Zi Zhan, conversing with a deaf man, just wrote. Then he laughed and said, He and I are both strange people. I use my hands for a mouth, and he uses his eyes for ears. One song's pointing to something very fluid and unobstructed here. Something that functions even when you're deaf or blind, or both. Think of that story of Helen Keller, who was profoundly deaf and blind from a very early age. And there was this moment when, with water running over her hand, suddenly she recognized that the little taps that her teacher were making on her hand stood for that water. The word water was being tapped out on her hand. And that was the turning point for her, when she went from being locked inside herself to being able to finally communicate. What was it that recognized water? Where does the I in our hand come from when we reach for a pillow in the night? Where does the eye on the staff come from? Or our ear, in our ear, or our tongue? This is really the core question in this koan. If we can see where the eye comes from, if we can see the perfect hands and eyes even in the most helpless person, even in somebody evil, depraved. Master Tenke said, "Have you seen the jeweled net? The universe wherein there is no obstruction between things in these hands and eyes." No obstruction. Crystal clear on all sides, open and unobstructed in all directions, emanating light and making the earth tremble in all places. Tell me, how is this manifested? If there's any life koan we have, it's this one. How do we manifest compassion? Master Setsho, he asked, where does the eye of the staff come from? And then he said, I cry, tut tut. It's like he was realizing that he couldn't possibly tell us that. We have to find it out for ourselves. Where does the eye of the staff come from? We'll stop here and recite the 4 vows.